They say if you repeat a lie often enough, it becomes the truth. In this house, if you talk about a thing long enough, it manifests. I made the mistake of describing my childhood home to a coworker on the phone. Now, my modern studio apartment has 3 extra rooms, a long corridor stretching into the dark, and I don't recognize the person sleeping in one of them. My name is Mark. I work as an audio archivist for the blind. My job is to describe places and objects into a microphone with excruciating detail. The texture of the wood, the angle of the shadows. You have to make the listener feel what you see. I got very good at it. Maybe too good. It started 2 months ago with small things. I was working from home, describing a 1950s crystal ashtray from a catalog. I spent 10 minutes talking about the chips on its rim. When I went to the kitchen for water, that exact ashtray was sitting on my counter. It still smelled like stale tobacco. I thought I was losing my mind. But then came the armchair, then the rotary phone. Of course, I tried to exploit it. I spent a whole day describing a briefcase full of cash. Nothing happened. I couldn't grant wishes. It required archival truth, not fantasy. You need a physical anchor, a high-resolution photograph you are actively studying, or a deeply etched memory. There was some kind of inexplicable magic to it. The manifestation process seemed to know the difference between restoring a record and inventing a lie. Slowly, reality in this apartment became porous. It was actively pulling things out of the ether to match my words. The true horror didn't start until Thursday night. I was drinking and called an old colleague. We got nostalgic, and I started talking about the house I grew up in back in Oregon. I described the narrow hallways, the smell of damp pine. I talked for 3 hours. When I finally hung up and turned around, my front door was gone. The architecture of my apartment had fundamentally changed. My walls had stretched, making room for a hallway that mirrored my childhood home. I couldn't believe my eyes. I walked down it, my heart pounding, and opened the last door. It was my old bedroom. There was a figure under the blankets, breathing slowly. A deep, wet sound. I didn't pull back the covers to see who it was. I quietly backed away, step by step, retreating to the bathroom, still not believing what was happening. It was the only room that remained modern, mine. The only piece of reality I could anchor myself to at that moment. I turned on the faucet and splashed freezing water on my face until my skin went numb. I stared at my reflection in the LED mirror, gripping the edges of the sink so hard my knuckles turned white. It's the alcohol, a fatigue-induced hallucination. I tried to think logically. I convinced myself that if I just waited it out, the house would reset. The architecture would return to normal. I sat on the cold tile floor for a couple of hours, trying to process what I had just seen. It's a dream, just a dream, I told myself. A severe hallucination. I just needed to calm down and wake up. I was sure that if I waited, reality would snap back into place. But suddenly, the silence broke. The old mattress springs in the extra room groaned. Whoever was sleeping in there had woken up. I pressed my ear against the bathroom door, holding my breath. I listened to someone moving down the hall, and that's when the real horror began to creep in. The footsteps were wrong. It didn't sound like a person walking. It sounded like something heavy dragging itself, pausing, then taking a clumsy, asymmetrical step. It bumped into the walls, like a puppet trying to remember how legs worked, and it made strange noises. It started moving all over the apartment, exploring the cage I had built for it. With a sickening drop in my stomach, I realized the thing in my house was not human. Pure, suffocating panic finally hit me. I didn't know how I created it, but I had to fix everything and get rid of it. I frantically tried to describe my apartment in its previous state, but out of shock, I couldn't focus. I stumbled over my words. I started yelling, describing an empty hallway. Nothing worked. I ordered the creature to vanish, but the sounds kept coming from behind the closed door. That's when I understood my flaw. I am an archivist. I record. I add. My voice can only manifest things, but it cannot erase them. I couldn't delete the monster. It was alive, and somehow I had pulled it into my reality. My voice gave out. I couldn't speak, and I just sat and listened to what was happening in the apartment. And then it started practicing. Not walking, but speaking. At first, it was just wet, guttural sounds. It was trying to figure out how a human throat worked. Then it started whispering mumbled fragments of my own words. It was learning to speak like me. By the fourth day, it had perfected my voice. The breaking point came when the creature finally spoke clearly, standing right outside the bathroom door. It used my voice. It started describing the bathroom, but not the one I was in, the one from my childhood home. And I saw the door slowly start to change, then the walls. Some objects disappeared, and some appeared. The entity wasn't trying to break the door down. It didn't need to. It spoke continuously, actively rewriting the architecture right through the walls. And if I had created my childhood home unconsciously, it knew exactly what it was doing. And then it started describing me. A frightened man, it whispered in my voice, slowly fading into the floorboards. I looked at my hands. They were losing their shape. My body was starting to become blurred. It was rewriting me. I was the anomaly. The creature needed a resident for its 90s house, and I was the wrong foreman. I was being archived, deleted. There was something special about this space that obeyed my voice. I had to overwrite the surrounding reality before it finished erasing me. I stood up. My chest was heaving. My throat was completely dry. But I forced myself to speak, looking directly at the faded door. I couldn't just invent an exit. It had to be a real memory to work. The heavy oak door from the old city library. I screamed, my voice hoarse. I focused with all my might on that image. The blurring on the wall stopped for a second. On the north wall, the brass handle I used to pull every single day. I squeezed my eyes shut, using my past to dig a tunnel out. A solid lock turning. I described it with every ounce of willpower I had left. The bathroom wall groaned against the entity's murmurs. And then, the metallic click. The library door materialized right over the dissolving tiles. I grabbed the brass handle, threw the door open, and lunged forward, expecting to see the wet pavement of the city. But there was no street. There is only white. An endless, blinding, sterile white void. The oak door vanished behind me. I was stunned. I take a deep breath to describe a city, a new room, an escape. I open my mouth to speak, to build a new world, but no sound comes out. I try to scream, but there is absolute silence. This place doesn't just lack geography, it lacks audio. I am a narrator trapped on a blank page, and my voice has been permanently